betting against the public, and that's what contrarian betting is. But it also exploits the very basic rule of odds making. The odds posted are not a prediction on the outcome of a game, but it is intended to get 50% of action on each side. Balanced action, because of course the odds makers will collect the juice. It is essentially, I guess you could say, a prediction on what the perfect line is to take advantage and to take into account public biases. Therefore, there are always going to be lines that are shaded as a result. The public, of course, prefers to bet favorites. They generally like to bet the much hotter team, the far superior team, and the overs. When you have access to the betting percentages, they will reveal the public biases, and you go against them. That's why contrarian betting does work. But it's not based purely on looking at a percentage of bets, and most importantly, it is most effective when it's based on that percentage of bets, not the percentage of money. So yes, a $5 bet will count the same as a $5,000 bet. In fact, the small players are usually the ones that are best for contrarian information. Long before there was the internet, I used to have the corner bookies tell me the way they would handicap games. The guys that were betting $5 and $10, and even back then $3 on a 4 and 5 and 6 and 10 team parlay, they would calculate their own consensus and then bet just the opposite of that. So again, that $5, $10 player, they are truly the best source for contrarian information. There's a sliding scale, though, to take into consideration the public biases. As I said, Joey Bag of Donuts likes betting the over. Joey Bag of Donuts likes betting the favorites. Essentially, 55% on a 6.5 point underdog is roughly equal to 70% on a 6.5 point favorite. That's why when you bet contrarian information, it's not just that simple. The highest percentage of bets are on this side. That's the strongest contrarian play. No. When you have a case where a fairly big underdog and the public is heavy on that, that stands out. And of course, it varies from sport to sport. In college football, for example, the public is going to love to bet that 25-point favorite. In the NFL and the NBA especially, when you have about a 5-point underdog and you're getting at least 55% of the bet, that is pretty significant. And, in college football, usually when you're talking about a big favorite, it's got to get about 75% of the public before that even becomes significant. A little bit less, though, for the NFL and the NBA. Now, where do you get this contrarian information? Certainly, Sports Insights / the Action Network has become a powerhouse. A lot of money behind that and a lot of accurate information from sports books. Now all over the world, they're even taking into consideration some of the state books. Of course, pregame, yeah, I know they don't have the world's greatest reputation as far as selling picks, but the information there is accurate when you can get the public betting percentages. OddsShark, which has been alleged to be owned by one of the biggest sports books in the world, and even some of the newer sites like FanDuel, of course, old reliable Sportsbook Review, as I said, Bet New Jersey, and other local sites. Now, this might come as a little bit of surprise to you, and I'm going to explain why. Yes, the Covers consensus, formerly known as Wagerline. Of course, I'm fully aware it's a contest site. People aren't even betting real money on that. But again, it gets back to what I told you. Joey Bag of Donuts, they are the best source for true contrarian information. That is why, for years, I most definitely take the Covers consensus into consideration, but also knowing that even more than any of the other sites with the real bets, which has the percentage of real bettors, where this is kind of pretend bettors, but they're competing for sportsbook money, etc., they like the favorites even more. So there, when you're talking about, say, a 14-point favorite in college football, it's got to get above about 80% before it really starts to become statistically significant. But we do have sliding scales, and we take everything into consideration. Now, why is the effectiveness of contrarian betting making such a comeback? The legalization, what are we up to, maybe 38 states, is it now? It means that media sites, large and small, they're making picks. And I'm talking about stuff like Sports Illustrated, Sporting News. It is true that CBS and ESPN does have some legitimate handicappers, but most of the other media websites, including local newspapers, they're hiring entry-level writers who know nothing, I mean nothing about gambling, and posting the quintessential square plays where they're just like going with the superior team, going with the hotter team. Yes, the better team always matches up well against the inferior team. And the truth is, even when you're talking about beat writers, one of the most true tweets that I've seen recently from high-profile, Todd Furman, who is a true sharp, he stated something very succinctly, and I've said it many times myself, but there is a humongous difference between knowing sports and knowing handicapping. There are guys out there that could tell you about the strengths and weaknesses of every team off of the top of their head, but it doesn't mean that they're great handicappers. They've got to know how the odds makers work, and also about situational betting and when teams are going to be overvalued and undervalued. That is enormously important as well. So the legalization of gambling means there's more bad information out there, more bad free picks that people are tailing, and therefore the contrarian information is returning to the early part of the century and last century, where it was a tremendous source of handicapping information. So again, with the more neophyte gamblers than ever, the better and more effective contrarian information is becoming. Still, that being said, at this point, and it is subject to change, still like contrarian information more as corroborating information, but again, it just continues to gain traction and making as good of a comeback as I've seen. Of course, you really want to win, get Joe Duffy's picks at offshoreinsiders.com. Exploits all the weapons that you have out there, whether it's contrarian information, of course, our world-famous computer systems, which are the envy of the industry. In addition, you get the Master Lock Line, which goes back to 1980 on the Score phones. Heck, I was only in high school at the time. Late Info, which also goes back to the Score phones. Me, I've been winning for you publicly since 1988. And Stevie Vincent's been winning since the free scoreboard days, the early part of the century, all at offshoreinsiders.com.